Greetings, everyone. We are here to talk about our mystery shopping exercise and telephone skills. I'm always fascinated that in our industry there are so many moments of truth that we have the opportunity to deliver a positive, a neutral, or a negative lasting impression on our visitors, on our employees, our donors, our sponsors, etc. And that's why high quality is so challenging in our industry. And really, that's why we're not all good at it. And that will fail, unfortunately, but we will fail. And that service recovery is so important in our organizations because if our why is strong and our passion is right, and our tools and techniques like training and setting expectations and empowering our staff, etc., are all solid, that we need to learn about every moment of truth people have. And thank you for your thoughtful reflection, or not reflection yet, but your conducting of the telephone calls for our mystery shop. So what I want to do is share with you a little bit more about what your data said as well as what the data I've collected over years says. So in the link provided, you will see an attachment of the data from your collective phone calls. I would like you to review that and make a comparison to the data I'm about to share with you. So, for me, you might think, again, what a geeky researcher, but that's okay because, again, every moment of truth has incredible meaning, so we need to understand them. And the telephone call for me over my career is a critical moment of truth. In marketing, we send out this communication to people to invite them to come visit or work for us. And we say, come on, here's what you can expect. And here's what it's going to look like and feel like and smell like and taste like and touch like, whatever. And that we present all this material to people, it creates an expectation, and then they might use a phone call or an email, right, or a text or a stop by to test that first visit. So the phone for me is this critical moment of truth that I've sent out these materials that got your attention, generated interest and a desire to act. You actually act as a consumer, right, or a possible employee, and you want to come apply and work for us, or you want to come again and visit us, but you use this transitionary piece to test or get some more information, etc. So the phone call you did, to me, is really critical because it bridges the gap between the marketing communication we send out and actually getting people to the destination and experiencing us. So how we handle that moment of truth in particular is again vital. So the calls you made and you know what you asked. Let me just get into, I've done the same thing for 10 years and use student data to generate a database and make comparisons about how our industry handles the telephone call on the telephone inquiry that comes in. So we've asked the same question over the years, and you will see here's what we did. We acted as mystery shoppers. Over 1,000 phone calls is in this database currently, and we called HTM types organizations: hospitality, tourism, event, food service, right, recreation types of organizations. And we did the typical call that you did. So with that, the data we're finding is roughly a quarter of the calls were hotel or resort related, recreation kinds of centers, fitness and tanning, golf and country clubs, bars or restaurants, retail stores in our industry, and then a whole bunch of other types of recreation, leisure, event kinds of businesses. So it was a nice sampling over the 1,000 different calls over the years. It's been a nice sampling of a lot of different types of organizations in our field, which truly is our field, a whole vast array of industries that come together to make something special happen. So when we look at it, the first question, as you know, were the number of rings. And what would the research say, or what have you been trained to do? What would your expectation be of an organization? How fast should they answer that call or that phone? Are you playing my game again? Are you thinking about it? You're really scared the people around you and say the number out loud. Usually when I ask this question of students, we tend to mostly agree on what the expectation is. And most people will say it's 2 rings, 3 rings at most, and most people are really confident about that being the expectation in our industry. Largely, I say that's the expectation is because we've trained you on that. Who hasn't heard in one of their internships or jobs they've had someone say, okay, you have to answer the phone quickly, 2 to 3 rings, or 2 rings, or 3 rings, whatever that agency's expectation is. So go back to the importance of quality and training and setting expectations. If we all know that's the expectation, then guess what? We get a chance to deliver on that or not. So not surprising that I think most of us would agree it would be 2 to 3 because we've been trained on it. It's the other questions we probably haven't been trained on and set an expectation. At least that's what my data says. So the response is the average was 2.3 rings over all those 1,000 phone calls. What we do know are certain organizations were a little better than others. A retail store or a golf country club took a little longer to get to that phone than a recreation center. And on some level that might make sense. A recreation complex may have someone right at the desk available to answer the phone, and that can kind of confine space. A retail store might have that same space, but they'll be spread around the store. So not so surprising that might take a little longer. And a golf and country club maybe as well. They may not have people in the office during that. So I still venture to say, would you call that our industry doing well or not so well? Well, if the expectation is 2 to 3 rings and we're averaging 2 rings, then that's pretty darn good. I will tell you that in that data, what we do know is that those rings ranged from immediate, like 0 rings, if you've ever had that happen. Actually, some of our student researchers had that happen. Someone picked up the phone before they even heard it ring because they got the ring on the other end. They grab it right away, and so they log that as 0 rings, to as many as 10 rings that went on and on and on and on. So 2 is the range, not many people in the really bad range. Most calls were between really 1 and 4 rings. So as we looked at the greeting, please look at the data you gathered as a class and make that comparison. I saw what you said, but I want you to make the comparison and to see how different the number of rings in my data set and your data set is, and make that conclusion in our discussion board or on any of the items that you'll reveal here. The greeting, we asked the same question again that you were asked to ask, and 3% actually just answered the phone hello. 35% said the name of the organization, so they might have said, Patty's Resort or Patty's Bar, Patty's Fitness Center, whatever. 21% said the agency name and the person's name, so this is Patty's Resort, Patty speaking. 17% said the name, person, and help, meaning Patty's Resort, this is Patty, may I help you? 10% may have said, this is Patty, may I help you? Or I'm sorry, Patty's Resort, may I help you? And then 6% actually had automated calls. Now I'd ask you again, what do you think the research says in terms of what's the right way to answer the phone? Well, most all the research will suggest, and I did link you at the end of your telephone survey to some professional literature on telephone calls. Besides just not my opinion, there's lots of literature about it, and I did previously do that in our materials last week. But the literature would say a buffer term is the right way to answer a call. To say one thing, hello, and or Patty's Resort, would not be as technically using telephone etiquette properly, but some type of buffer terminology is really effective. So the agency name and the person, the 17% or the 10% agency and help are all appropriate ways to answer the telephone according to our industry. Now, it can get too long, and I imagine some of you actually work for an organization that has 4 buffer terms: agency, person, help, and then maybe a tagline about what's going on in the organization that day, or a marketing statement. That can be incredibly damaging as well. We always want the person answering the phone to have a sincerity and, again, show that why and that passion for serving people and anyone on that other end. So the person who you decide answers the call or the phone in your organization is critically important because they're the deliverer of that moment of truth. So we want them to have a set of skills that they can handle and manage that effectively. But we also want that whatever that greeting is to be appropriate, that they don't run through it really fast, they don't say it so fast you can't even understand it, or it feels like it's 15 seconds long and the person just wants to talk to you and you're keeping them from doing that. So know there's a balance, and so at most it would be kind of 3 buffers, but those buffers have to be pretty short. We want to get, sincerity, appreciation for the call, make sure they know who they're calling, that they've gotten the right place, but length is the enemy of interest here. So when I look at this data, I see 48% of the 1,000 phone calls handled it in a way we would call correct. Now, going back to past student discussions I've had, part of the problem is there's not a lot of consistency in our organizations. Now, most of us somewhat are trained about how to answer the phone, but not always. So we might be told, pick it up in 2 rings. We're less told how exactly to answer the phone, so there may be some inconsistency. But is that way we're told to answer the phone the right, again, number of buffer terms, etc.? And then there was a slew of other kinds of responses in this as well. Sorry. Okay, cost, hours, and directions. When on that 5-point scale, I asked students to log in how those calls were handled. So they asked again, what does it cost? What are the hours of operation for whatever outlet or aspect of the business? And how do I get there from wherever you wanted to say? So cost, on a 5-point scale, 5 is they handled that exceptionally. Cost was handled at a 4, hours at a 4.1, and directions at a 4.0. So I'd say to you again, as a manager or an owner of an organization in our industry, how do you feel about that data across the system? The greeting, 50% of them were handled the right way. So I think we have some opportunities there. In terms of the 3 kind of most common questions someone who hasn't been to us before may ask, the common questions, ones that anybody on the phone should be able to answer or get a quick response to get that answered, because again, incredibly common in our field. We handled at a 4 out of a 5. So how do you think, or what do you think about that? I think you're nodding and you're kind of like this and you're going, it's pretty good. And I agree, it is pretty good. If we put it on a 10-point scale, we'd say that's about 80%. And a B is pretty good. But if it's your organization and you're concerned about quality, this might be an area that we could improve. We're doing a good job, but could we move it and do better? Could we always handle the most common questions we're confronted with? I would hope so. You can see some organizations do a little worse than others, but we need to be prepared for the top questions we will get as an organization and be prepared with thoughtful responses and train our employees on how you would handle those situations. So again, a really important element here is with every moment of truth that we decide what's the expectation, and then we train to that expectation, and then we review, like with mystery shopping, how are we doing toward achieving that expectation. So in this case, we're good, but we're not great. I wonder how your organizations did. And I already looked, but want you to make that comparison too. Closings in this regard are equally as important. We know people retain 25% of what they hear. And isn't that really exciting for someone like me? Because even in this video, you're only getting 25%. So hopefully when you make that comparison, you'll get a little more. Hopefully when you have to type and reflect on it, you get a little more. Because my objective here, why I'm asking you to do different things in every assignment, is that you remember more of it. So with that, we know the end of the phone call might even be a higher percentage of people remembering how you concluded that call. And again, for someone in marketing, which is really everybody in an organization, that moment of truth is critical. So how did the calls get ended in the 1,000 database? 14% really said nothing. Now, you might sit here and say, how could they say nothing? Well, they do. They actually, people might end the call, and I would say, if I was the mystery shopper, something like, well, thanks for the information, and they might just hang up. So 140 calls out of 1,000 actually said nothing. 40% said goodbye. 25% said thank you for calling. And 8% said we hope to see you visit. 13% said some other combination. You bet, you're welcome, okay, kind of thing. So what do you think about this? Now, some of you probably nodding your head. You're going, it's pretty good. Sounds pretty good. Okay, 14% said nothing, but the others all said something. That's good. Well, I want you to really think about quality here, though, and think about chapter 2 and 3 about creating an experience and creating high quality experiences. And if it's the last thing someone's going to remember on this phone call with you, or maybe the last thing even in an email with you, or the last thing in any type of dialogue face to face, what is it you want them to remember? This is a potential new guest. Someone who can't find us, wants cost and directions because they're debating us maybe versus other things. This is a moment of really big proportion. So what I want you to think about is what would be the absolute best way we could respond to that. And I hope you find, we'll use this little bell as ding, 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 ding. We hope you know it's the 8% who actually said, we hope to see you visit. Can you imagine what a difference at the end of a call that someone actually says to you at the end, sincerely and with great conviction, we really hope you come to see us. Thanks for calling. Come by. We'd like to really have you come to our bowling center or our entertainment venue, right, or our festival. Can't wait to have you there. Wouldn't that make a bigger impact than any of those other conclusions? 40% said goodbye. Typical, but you know what? We've all been taught that since we were old enough to answer the phone. And we were probably 2 or 3 years old talking to a grandparent, and our parents said to us, say goodbye, right? Probably one of the most first things we've ever been taught about the telephone is to say goodbye. So again, appropriate, yes, but not appropriate in one of our industries, in our organizations that are creating experiences that are of high quality. Every moment of truth counts, and this is a really important one. So I see the closing as a huge opportunity for organizations. Most of us have never been trained on how to end the phone call as a business or in a business. So talking to our employees and coaching, and there might be a variety of ways that they personalize that and say that, but we want sincerity, we want appreciation for that phone call, and we want to make some other compelling kind of statement like, we hope to see you visit. I worked for someone once when I first worked for Marriott, and I had an office right outside the place all of the event planners would meet to write in their diaries, which is where they were big books that we took all the meeting space and we actually blocked out meeting space. So there was a bank of phones by that big, huge diary. It's all computerized now, obviously. But what a gift it was for me as a new manager to sit really, my office was right outside that diary area. So every sales and event person would come by there to block out the space and they'd be talking to their client. There's a gentleman named Steve who had a big impact on me as a young person because of the way he ended every phone call. Every time he talked to one of his clients on the phone and they were booking space and guest rooms at this big hotel, he would say to them, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate your business. Thanks so much for calling, and I'll look forward to talking to you soon. And it was such a difference because there would be 10 managers coming and going from these phones and booking it. But again, I got to hear everybody. Talk about data collection. And I kept feeling the difference between everybody's calls. And Steve's would just stand out like you couldn't believe. And he taught me as a very young person the power of the conclusion, the power of the closing. And what a different feel, because he was always sincere. And so even if he said it to the same client 10 times, he meant it, for one, and it sounded natural. He clearly brought out his passion and reason and the reason he liked doing what he was doing, even because he really wanted to make a difference in people's, events and their catering space and the guest rooms that they booked for these big conventions, etc. So I think of Steve often when I think of this closing. Isn't it funny how people you meet along the way, it might be one little thing you take from them, and how cool that I got to take it from him. This is an opportunity for our industry. I took a sneak peek again at your data, but take a look at your data and see, have we gotten any better at this? Or are we still doing the same kind of thing? And can you in your HTM organization, even today where you're interning or working, make a difference? More importantly, certainly when you become a manager or grow in your career, I want you to take this one little moment of truth and think really seriously about it, because every little thing makes a difference. Overall, the students felt 2/3 of the phone calls were handled professionally. They really collectively, regardless of kind of the individual point system it was given, they thought they were good. But a whole third of them, they thought there were really opportunities for improvement. I ask you to think about this the same way. Are 300 of 1,000 phone calls, is that good enough? Really, 350 out of 1,000 phone calls. Is that good enough as an industry? What do? Hospitality, tourism, event, food service, recreation. What kind of industry are we in? And that moment of truth on the phone, we are not getting that incredibly right. So all the better. We can understand all these theoretical concepts, but if we don't look at where we're at and see the gap between these two places, we will never improve. So when you're in class this semester, my goal is to share with you again, here's the theory, but also here's some reality. And what do we need to do to move toward a stronger, more vibrant, more effective industry? One step at a time. So welcome to Telephone Skills. Thanks for thinking about it. Now reflect on our data set and make your comments in the discussion board. We'll see you soon.